Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to start with a quote. The ears of the leader must ring with the voices of the people. Great president once said that. Mr. President, I rise today to make it clear to everyone in this chamber exactly why I cannot support this legislation. You've heard the chants outside this chamber, not just today and last night, but many times over the past 2 years. Thousands of people have shown up, union and non-union, men and women, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, even their children. These are the working families of Michigan. These are the thousands of people that I would sit here to represent. When I vote no, I'm voting no on behalf of the thousands of families. Who are you voting yes for? Grover Norquist? I know he sent you all a letter asking you to support this anti-worker legislation. You are voting yes because a handful of corporate lobbyists, a handful of fat cats in the back are telling you to. That's who you work for, the powerful few, the guys with top hats and monocles. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I work for the people, for the many. I proudly represent them in casting this no vote. I'm doing what's right, what's good for the people. And I tell you this, Mr. President, we will fight you. We will not let this stand. We'll fight you from Kalamazoo to Timbuktu. We'll fight you from the streets and in the suites. We'll fight you in the penthouse and we'll fight you in the outhouse. And Mr. President, I'll tell you this right now, when it's all said and done, when it's all over, we will grab the thunderbolt of truth. We will grab the rod of revolution and we will have our victory. And the spoils will go to the working people of Michigan. And you will forever remember the day when you thought you could conquer labor. You were sorely mistaken. Be prepared to engage in the fight of your life. You might win this battle, but the wars are brewing, sir. The wars are brewing, sir. And we're coming, and we're taking no prisoners, and we're taking no quarter. And Mr. President, when all said is done, working men and women of this state will reign supreme. Thank you, and I ask that my comments be printed in the journal.
Or you can also see us all around the world at www.whpr.com. That's www.whpr.com. As always, we want to honor those who protect us, fight for us, bleed and die for us. That's our men and women who are serving us abroad, our military. We also want to thank God for our local heroes, our police officers, our firefighters, our emergency services personnel, the men who run the gunfire and burning buildings every day and provide life-saving treatment so that we can be safe and live in a civil society who are willing to pay the price for our freedoms and liberties and safety and security right here in the good old U.S. of A. I also want to thank God for everybody out there in Detroit. We love you. We appreciate you. We thank God for all of you, anybody who's watching. You know we consider you to be family right here on The Young Effects. So please join me for a moment of silence as we give honor to those who honor us with their sacrifice, patriotism, fidelity, and love, who represent the best qualities of mankind. We say to you, thank you, we love you, we appreciate you, and we'll continue to keep praying for you. God bless you, and we will never forget your sacrifice. Please join for a moment of silence. All right, thank you for that. The numbers for you to call in are right here in the bottom of the screen. It's open mic night. You got any calls, anything you want to talk about, you can call in. We got any callers? No? Okay. What I want to talk about, first of all, I know it's been a while since I've been here last, but what I want to talk about is we saw all the initiatives that passed. Marijuana is now legal in the state of Michigan. The ganja, sticky chocolate, puff puff pass, sour diesel, the green kush, the purple haze is now legal. What do we do with it? How do we regulate it? How do we talk about this? What's the best ways to protect our children? Let me say this first and foremost. Remember, we do live in America. We live in a country where things in your medicine cabinet are more dangerous than marijuana. We got a raging opioid epidemic going on throughout the country and in Michigan. I think opioid deaths went up by 14% in this peninsula state, Great Lakes state. Childhood accidental overdose deaths have gone up 3 times from 1997 to 2015. The FDA just approved Disuvia. Now get this, fentanyl, which is so powerful that it's being cut with heroin, not the other way around, is 15 times more powerful. No, I'm sorry, 50 times more powerful than heroin. And the FDA just released a drug, Disuvia, which is 10 times more powerful than fentanyl and 1,000 times more powerful than morphine. Why are these drugs being legal and marijuana, which no one has ever died from, which is less addictive than caffeine, which is being used as an exit drug for getting rid of all these prescription drugs, which, as a matter of fact, in places where medical marijuana is legal, opioid overdose deaths have gone down by 25%. And remember, 19,000 people died from opioid deaths right here in the Great Lakes state. So I want to know what you think. Legalize marijuana, yay or nay? What do you think? What's your thoughts on that? We're going to talk about a lot of different things right now. We talk about freeing the weed today. We got some callers. Caller, you on the air. Welcome to the Young Effect. You want to support free the weed? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Explain.
Well, like I said, we already have a serious problem, and I believe it's complicated even worse. And I remember what was it? The lottery. Not the lottery. Yeah, it is the lottery. They said that it was going to help the public education, and found out that's not really it doesn't help in the black community.
Yeah.
And so I believe the same thing's going to happen. Corporate greed going to help build the pockets of black cats. The communities like Detroit, Flint are not going to get anything. Benton Harbor are not going to get that.
Well, let me say this real quick. First of all, that's an excellent point. And I hear this a lot when we talk about the issue of marijuana in terms of how is the money going to help us. We're talking about $520 million over 5 years that will be generated, estimated to be generated from the legalization of marijuana. And you know, we heard this talk about the lottery and money coming to the schools from the lottery, and we haven't really seen that materialize. I understand that. I also think it's a question of what do you want, though? Do you want to be having the argument about how much money is going to be coming into state coffers or not? Or do you want to have the argument of how much money we're going to be spending to get little Johnny and little Jane out of jail because he got arrested for possession of marijuana and his whole life is ruined? How many children or how many kids who are trying to go to college, 250,000 across this great nation, that have had their college loans denied for possession of marijuana, which is safer than what's legally out there now and has better medical benefits than what is legally out there now. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, people are saying, why should we take the risk? Why should we do this? You know, this is not something that's going to help us financially. You know, I personally think, though, that if we're talking about, you know, taking away things that are harmful to society, you know what I mean? Even though marijuana is not lethal, all these other drugs that we have out there that are lethal are, you're going to have to start having conversations about whether or not we're going to ban alcohol. Get rid of all the alcohol, get rid of all these bars. As long as people get blew out on Friday and Saturday night, all up and down Woodward. We're going to start having a conversation about cigarettes and tobacco, which has a 32% dependency rate. one of the most lethal forms of vices known to mankind. You know what I mean? You got 40,000 people who die a year from alcohol, 100,000 people who die a year from cigarettes. I mean, they have no medical benefits whatsoever of any kind. So I understand exactly what you're saying. You're making a good point. I just think that if we're going to have this conversation based off of children and what they're going to do, or based off of, revenue or not revenue, we're going to have to start having conversations about what's happening. In terms of big marijuana, which you talked about earlier, that's critical. I think it's very important that, one, understand we have licensing in the legislation or in the proposal involving micro businesses. I think it's for a micro business. I think it's it's 100 plants, and then you want to have a mid-sized business. I think it's 500, and then if you want to have a larger size, Class C, it's 2,000 plants that you could grow. So I understand what you're saying, but I also think we need to start doing is have public-private partnerships with the local units of government. We need to start saying that if you're going to come into Detroit, at least, you need to have minority business partners. And I think we need to take advantage of cannabis as an opportunity, be it put people back to work. And we need to mandate, and we need to demand that we have more African-American representation in marijuana field, especially for black folks who have suffered the most from the war on drugs. 60% of the people who are in prisons now are black and brown.
Well, I just think, with all the smoke and screen, I think that black people aren't going to benefit from this. I think only if a few black people are in it, going to benefit. The mass are not benefit from this. Just don't believe it.
Say it again. I can't hear you.
I think that if a few black people get involved with the marijuana, I think it's the opportunity to work that. I think the masses of black people aren't going to get the benefit. I think it's going to, as it always has been. They always start out with the smoke and screen of stuff, and then when you get down to the real deal, black people don't do anything.
I agree with you totally. I mean, that's why I think, again, we need to start having public-private partnerships with they got good capital, they got dynamic financing. I also think that, later on in the conversation, if you want to start having controls of, have a conversation whether or not we have more of a state-involved regulatory system like we do with the 3-tier system in alcohol here in Michigan, I think that's a good conversation. That's a legitimate concern, because you don't want big business coming in here and, and big marijuana coming in here in terms of taking all the jobs and opportunities for the people who suffer from it from the most. And I think we should do like they did in Oakland County, where they provided licenses, up to, I think they provided 50% of the licenses they reserved for people who were victims of the war on drugs. So I totally understand with you wholeheartedly what you're saying. I think that's an excellent point. I think there's ways in which we could do that. But I personally think that, locking people up, giving somebody 20 years in prison for selling $15 worth of weed, I think that the thousands of people who have been killed in this country due to dime bags being distributed, and the over 500,000 victims over in Mexico due to the drug war, I think it's just too many people who've lost their lives needlessly over a plant that is proven to be safer than what currently exists now, and proven to be less addictive, as well as having much of it, a vast amount of medical benefits for people who desperately need that. That's cheaper, and it's medicine that you could grow, not something you have to buy from the pharmaceutical industry. So I totally understand what you're saying, but I also see the upside of this as well. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your call.
Thank you.
Very excellent call, very excellent point. Got another caller. Caller, you on the air. Welcome to the Young Effect. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes. First of all, I voted yes on all 3 proposals.
Me
I
too.
don't think nothing wrong with if somebody want to have recreational marijuana and smoke that. Sometimes people smoke it for their health reasons. If that's what they want to do, that's none of my concern.
That's right.
Like you say, they smoke cigarettes and liquor. If that's what them want to do, what I got to do, it ain't my. I don't do it. I don't smoke no weed, all that. I might drink or something, but that ain't nobody's business. Somebody making money off of it. Keep the money in the city of Detroit. You got people come from the suburbs coming to Detroit, getting all these hard drugs and all this stuff.
Yeah.
ODing like that Commissioner Dwyer's son did the other day out there at Congress Body. They
God
don't
bless
talk
him.
more on stuff
His
like
family.
that. But anyway, but I'm just saying, if sometimes people have to have stuff for their health reasons. Why people want to, drinking, they liquor, and they can go pop full of cigarettes because the owners are not going to put up, and the people in Congress there. Now, one more thing I want to ask a question. I'm hang up for the answer. The Democrats, it's over the House now. Are they over the Senate? Is that the top one? I'm hang up.
No, I'll tell you right now.
I'm
No.
hang up so I can listen.
Go ahead. Thank you for your call. I appreciate it. Listen, the Democrats are over the House. That's the lower chamber, lower body. They control the House. They don't control the Senate. Now, they do control investigatory powers in terms of investigations and things of that nature, which I'm sure they'll be doing into Trump and things of that nature. That'd be harder to ask harder questions. So I think it's going to be very interesting what happens over these last 2 years now that he lost the House. We did not win the Senate, unfortunately. As a matter of fact, we lost seats in the Senate. So I think it's going to be, Bill Nelson, senator from Florida, did not hold his seat, unfortunately. So, he gave a very classy concession speech, but ultimately he will no longer be the senator in Florida. We lost seats in the Senate, 1 seat in the House. So we'll have to see what happens. But I think that's going to be real interesting in terms of what happens in the House, in terms of, will the agenda involving African-American people, will that be addressed? I think that when we start talking about what's going on with our brothers and sisters who are Latino, in terms of immigration, in terms of pathway to citizenship, in terms of temporary protected status, I think those are all really good things. In terms of reforming or eliminating ICE, I agree with that. I think those are good things. I'm not taking away from that at all. I think on the issue in terms of women, in terms of making sure they can preserve the right to choose, in terms of equal pay for equal work, I think that's a very necessary thing, as well as making sure that we do have more representation of women in the boardroom, as well, as CEOs, and also making sure that we do something about sexual assault. Making sure that women can be able to confront their attackers via lawsuits in court, not through mandatory arbitration, and also making sure that we authorize the Violence Against Women Act. I think that's something that would be really good towards protecting women. I also think that, in terms of our Arab brothers and sisters in the Muslim ban and getting rid of that, repealing that, and treating people, and getting back to what the principles of America was, on the Statue of Liberty, giving you're tired, giving you're hungry, your masses, you're tired, you're poor, those yearning to be free. I think we need to get back to that and back to those fundamental principles. And so I think those are all really good things, and we should continue to keep doing that. However, I always see a little bit of resistance historically when it comes to the issues of police brutality, when it comes to the issues of pay equity for African-American people, when it comes to the issues of criminal justice, particularly the fact that African-Americans are 4 times more likely to be arrested for possession of marijuana, even though they use it the same rate as their white counterparts. How they are, according to National Registry exonerations, 12 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of a drug crime, 7 times more likely wrongfully convicted for murder, and 3.5 times more likely wrongfully convicted for sexual assault. I think that when it comes to addressing these issues, and I'm going to put this on the table, I think it comes to the issue of reparations as well for slavery. Whether it be Jim Crow stress syndrome, or whether it be through epigenetics where, stress and abuse and oppression can be passed down through the genes. Based off of 250 years of based on 500 years of slavery, Jim Crow, eugenics, the drug war, and mass hyper-incarceration. So I think when it comes to these issues, there's been usually a hesitation towards wanting to deal with that. And how that's going to be addressed with the progressive community is going to be an interesting question that we have yet to see. So I'm hopeful that this is addressed. I'm hopeful that we deal with this, but I haven't really seen it as an agenda. And what I've seen Bernie Sanders talk about, particularly on the issues of reparations and not being supportive of it, I'm not saying that people can't change and people can't evolve. You know what I mean? But I haven't seen it yet, so we'll have to wait and see. Another caller? Caller, you on the air, Walter Young Effect.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Yeah, I just think that people need to study, learn the laws. Don't let your ignorance cause you to fall into these private, white-owned prisons that's counting black heads to fill up these jail cells. Jobs and housings are at risk because the old heads as well as the young need to know that you can lose your, you can become homeless if you're in a federally subsidized housing, and you could possibly lose your job or not get a job.
Yeah.
And the police can pull you over, and if they do immediate drug tests,
Yeah.
they can cause you to get another record because they'll say, like drinking, that you're driving and smoking. So I think it's important to learn the laws and all the
That's very
other
true.
effects
Gotta
that
learn
you
'em.
would have just due to your ignorance that you will fall into that trap. So know that because of the federal laws, there's a restriction on that.
Still legal
Know that if
federally.
you're driving, drinking, texting, smoking, there's a restriction on that.
Yeah.
And
Don't drive with it. Don't smoke it in public either.
Right, and I'm thinking with the job thing, I think some of the jobs will take advantage of it because they won't have to pay compensation. If you get hurt, you know, they won't drug test you, but if you get hurt, you won't get no compensation benefits. So it might work in their favor because of the benefits of not paying you due to you having a fall or accident.
Well, look.
while
Well, let me
on
say
their
this though.
property.
But let me say this though too. Look, marijuana is different. Remember, because the effects of marijuana only last for a couple hours, but it can stay in your bloodstream up to 28 days. It can be stored in your fat, whereas compared to alcohol, it doesn't. So just because you got marijuana in your system doesn't necessarily mean that you're high. Let's remember that first and foremost. And the only way to really figure that out is through a blood test. You know, so most companies, when they do a drug test, it's urinalysis. Well, urinalysis is not like the best way to determine whether or not someone is impaired through smoking marijuana or not, or ingesting marijuana or not. So I think that that's going to evolve in time. The Drug Free Workplace Act, excuse me, in 1988 is still in effect. So if people don't want folks who have marijuana to be able to get a job, test to get a job, they can. They can't. That's up to them. But listen again, this is a treatment problem. It's not a criminal problem. And I don't think that giving people records is somehow going to help folks like go get a job afterwards. More than likely, it's not. And so, you know, I mean, I understand what people are, I'm not saying you, but I understand what other people say about that. But me personally, I just don't understand how the criminalization of this plant, and, you know, people talk about decrim, but decrim is just for decriminalization, excuse me, but decriminalization is just for possession. It's not for distribution. So you're going to have a whole, and like I said earlier about folks, black folks who are 12 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted. So you're going to have a whole bunch of people who are in prison for, or who are in jail for distribution who weren't distributing. I mean, that's just the way it is. And if they are arrested for possession, they're going to be lined up around 36th District Court. And if you ever been in 36th District Court or some of these other, if they, or they might be sent to a drug court or something like that. But if you've been through this process, it's not a real good process. I know from personal experience. For period. I was there for traffic. I'm sorry, not for drugs. For traffic, excuse me. I'm sorry. But, you know, it's a traffic ticket.
My
But-
point is just be extremely cautious and know where your rights,
Treatment.
what kind of rights you do have. Because to me, if an employer doesn't do a drug test, it's because it's going to be to his advantage if you hurt yourself and they find it. And I'm sure if you hurt yourself, they're going to make sure
Yeah.
they go through the
Workers'
extremes
comp,
of
you're
a
right.
blood or a hair so that they won't have to pay the compensation. Because you got to look at your employer. He's in it for the profit. He might not care if you smoke or not. But if you come in there and you cause him a liability by hurting yourself, he gonna go through the extra testing.
Well, if it's
so
a
that,
danger
he
to,
will save himself
if
the
it's a
profit, because that's all these
right,
corporations
if it's a
corporate greed.
danger to him and his employees or his business, then yeah, I mean, I understand what you're trying to say, but yeah, he's gonna feel some type of way. But I mean, it's the same thing with alcohol. It's the same thing with opioids. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right, but also, you get your cards. Everybody should have their cards. That'll help too. You can get your marijuana card.
And renew your card.
If you have your own business in your own home, you might be a lot safer than somebody, like I said, living in these subsidized housing.
Right.
And again, you have to worry about employment. So unless
Which is
you got your own
ridiculous.
business in your own home, and you decide to go into the business, whatever it is, whether it's the cannabis or whatever, you'll be a lot safer than people just thinking being a user, abuser is not going to cause you to be a loser. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Love you. Appreciate you. Love you too. You take care, my friend. I'll go get another caller. Hello, caller. Hello.
Yes.
Hey.
What do you think of our governor-elect, Whitmire? I voted for her.
Whitmer, yeah, I think she's gonna be real good. I think she's gonna do a lot of great things. I'm really excited to see what she's gonna do.
Yeah, but she's
gonna expunge the records.
I put Schumer, the name Schumer on her staff also. And so I was thinking, I said, now why would she put him on the Republican? But sometimes you have to use people when you can use them, this kind of stuff. Our people is always hollering about they're not doing nothing for us. We need to get some of our so-called leaders in the city of Detroit and go to Washington, go here, and demand what we want. Don't just complain about it. You'll complain about it until they start cutting your water and raising your water bill on your building. Then you see 50 or 60 of them sitting down there. And as far as that marijuana and stuff, you'd be surprised when the judges are sitting up there. That's why they get up all the time and go in the back, taking drugs or whatever they take, sit around them cases, especially on our city council. A lot of them, the decisions they make, they're probably smoking something too. Okay, I'm going to hang up and listen.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to get into the habits of elected officials. Thank you for your call. You like they be smoking too. We don't know. There's no evidence to prove that. The other caller? Not necessarily accurate. Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Okay, I was wondering, since they want the public to have a marijuana card, why don't they push legislation to have a liquor card?
Hey man, I totally can see where you coming from. You sounded too much like Wright, man. That's a real good point. I don't know why they don't. I don't know why. Now you're not gonna have to have one anymore for recreational when it comes to this state. If you want to buy it in the state, it's still illegal federally. But that's a good point, man. That's a real good point. You know what I'm saying? And you should have a card for alcohol because it's lethal. Huh?
Excuse me. Are you saying with the recreational marijuana you don't have to have a card?
Yeah, recreational you have to have a card. No.
Really?
Yeah, medical you do, but recreationally you don't.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. But I think that's a good point, man. I mean, alcohol is much more lethal. And, so, I mean, that's a good point. I also just want to say this real quickly, just for food for thought. Remember, alcohol prohibition, the way in which they ended prohibition of alcohol was they passed laws state by state by state by state first. Then the federal government decided to end prohibition. And Michigan was the first state in the union to end alcohol prohibition. Not just by state law, but also Michigan was the first state to vote nationally or federally when to end prohibition voted to affirm the 21st Amendment, which was repeal of the 18th Amendment, which was the prohibition of alcohol. So it's first done state by state by state, and then nationally we'll come together and decide whether or not they should legalize it. I personally think we should. I think it should be legal across the country. I think there's been way too many arrests for possession of a plant that you cannot die from, that has medical benefits, whether you're treating, and in some rare cases curing, but treating primarily Lou Gehrig's disease, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, wasting disease, fibromyalgia, leukemia. They're talking about it for people who are on the spectrum or who have autism, or helping people with the PTSD and ADD or ADHD. So these are things that the hyperthyroidism. They're using it also for football players who play in the NFL to help them treat CTE, that's excessive concussion syndrome. So there are a multitude of things that or just glaucoma, that's pressure behind the eyes, or just chronic pain that you may have that helps you. Sorry about that. That helps everybody. That helps you absolutely do that. So these are the things that we are using. This is the plant that we are using in order to do this. Now, there's a difference between, medical marijuana, where it's high CBD or cannabidiol, which is basically the stuff that they're using in order to treat pain and inflammation and, have the health benefits, and high levels of THC, which is primarily stuff that you use in order to get high or get baked, or, as us the younger kids say in my generation, get faded. So there's difference in terms of what you do and how you do it. But overall, marijuana has a lot of great applications and medical benefits that we have not really, we really don't understand yet, because there hasn't been a whole lot of studies on it, because it is prohibited. And the reason for its prohibition has more to do with the incarceration of black and brown people than it does actually about incarceration. It actually does about keeping people away from marijuana because of its harms. So, I think that was why prohibition came into the place for marijuana in the first place. And history bears that out. So this is why I think that's a good thing for that. I also just want to comment, I think it's a really good thing that we finally have a commission in order to deal with the issue of redistricting. I was a part of that process in 2010, one of the worst and most cynical processes I ever seen. You have politicians who are picking their voters rather than the voters picking the politicians. I think that that's a serious problem with democracy. I think it's undemocratic, and I'm glad that we have an independent commission that's doing that. Now, I understand there's some problems with the fact that it's not elected. So people who are part of they're not elected. They're appointed by the Secretary of State. Thank God we got Jocelyn Benson in there, who will now be part of the Secretary of State. So I think that's a real good thing. I think what she's going to do for this issue, I think is going to be really good. And I think we're going to move the state forward in a really bright way. And so I'm very excited about what happened with Proposal 2, and I'm glad that passed. Proposal 3, I think, was basically about, enshrining or putting things about making it easier for folks to vote in the Constitution. So now we're going to have access to no absentee voting, which I think is going to be phenomenal, which is going to encourage people voting by mail, which I think is going to be much more convenient and consistent, and open up the process in order to do that. We're going to have election audits more often, so we're going to have more accountability and transparency in terms of the process, in terms of how votes are counted, to make sure that we can ensure a golden standard, a high standard in terms of elections, and in terms of how they're conducted, in terms of how those votes are being counted, so that we can make sure they're being counted the right way, so we can make sure that we have accountability and transparency in terms of how that's doing. So I think those are really good things overall in terms of Proposal 3. and Proposal 2. So, and I think Proposal 1 passing, like I said earlier, I think that's going to be real good. We give opportunity to give folks jobs and not jails, which is what we got right now. And I also think that we can start putting people back to work. I think now the question is, what are we going to do for the victims who were the war on drugs? Are we going to start giving clemency to people who are in jail now? Are we going to start giving expungement records for people who went to jail who came back out? The Governor-elect Whitmer said that she's going to be giving those out. So I think that's a really good thing in terms of clemency and in terms of expungement. I think that's a really good thing that we're talking about doing right now. I think we also need to open up that process in terms of folks who, quite frankly, um, who have those type of records or who have that on their record, that they can be able to have expungement and also be able to participate in the business. I think that's something that's going to be a major impediment going forward, is a lot of people are going to be barred because of the laws that are passed. And I think that now we got to start looking at reforming that and how do we change that and what do we do to go back to transition folks from people who were once victims of the war on drugs to now being business owners and being able to benefit from the legalization of marijuana financially. And I think that's what we got to start doing and start working on. And I also think it's a tremendous opportunity for the city of Detroit to be able to make money and bring folks back to work by doing this. Because you better believe you got people from across the state and lawyers and all kind of people who are coming together and trying to figure out how they're going to make money off this. And I think there needs to be some laws involved, making sure that, I think the same percentage of folks we got that African Americans that own medical marijuana or provisioning centers within Detroit is the same within the state, which is 1%. 1%. That is shameful. And so I think instead of us having this anti-marijuana, stance, I think we need to start coming up with ways in which coming up with policies in terms of making sure that black folks are at the helm and that they are starting to get involved in terms of jobs and contracts and opportunities in terms of cannabis. Because I really think it's a tremendous opportunity for folks to be able to get put back to work. So, we got any? Okay. So I think that's something we want to talk on that front. Also, I just want to say this really quickly in terms of the school aspects, in terms of what's going on right now. I just talked to Vidi, superintendent of Detroit Public Schools, with Nikolai Vidi. We talked, very briefly about lead in the school situation. I was like, just talking to him about what does he need, what's the needs going forward. And for what he told me, it would cost over $500 million to fix all of the infrastructure within DPS. $1.4 billion over 5 years because of upkeep costs and things of that nature. So I'm probably going to try, I'm working with, because they got a supplemental they're going to pass later on this year. So I'm working with the appropriations chairman. Hopefully we'll be able to get $500,000 for the hydration station. That's basically where they have water that's available on the station for people to be able to drink. I think that's the cheapest or probably the lowest hanging fruit in terms of agreement, if you will, in terms of money that overall we could agree on in terms of helping Detroit right now temporarily in this situation. But long term, we talking about fixing the infrastructure to make sure this doesn't happen again. You talking about $500 million. And $1.4 billion over 5 years. And he told me the number one reason why this is because the emergency managers, man. The emergency managers will come in and run the school district into the ground. And we just don't have the finances. Even with the new code, old code system that they set up, most of the money that we're getting is going to the debt from the old code, meaning Detroit Public Schools, now Detroit Public Schools Community District. So they're not getting that money. Times are tight. That's why we take advantage of cannabis and get that money. And if we petition, the federal government to be able to legalize marijuana federally, we can start having businesses, start having operations, putting people to work. Locals have a lot of power and leeway in terms of how this is done. The law was crafted for locals to have a lot of influence in terms of how many people come in, how many don't. We got 75 provision centers right now in the city of Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. 75 right now. It was down from like 200 something before. But a lot of those guys weren't licensed. You know what I mean? So how do we do that? How do we take advantage of it? I think it's a tremendous opportunity. Now, if you want to talk about what neighborhoods you're going to put them in and where, that's fine. We should talk about that. But you got to remember, like 23% of the miles in Detroit is vacant. Vacant. Ain't nothing on them. Marijuana is a unique product, man, because it sells itself. Sells itself. We just got to talk about where. We got to talk about how. I mean, still business. You mean locations, everything. I understand. Location, location, location. You want that curb appeal and all that. But we should be doing everything we can to work to put our brothers and sisters in this business, in this opportunity. You have more money for the schools, have more money for the communities, and get people up off these streets, man. We're going to take a call right now. Caller, you on the air. Welcome to the Young Effect. Hello?
Yeah, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. What's going on, Tom?
It's all good and getting better.
Great.
You know, but going to the marijuana thing, I voted no on it.
Okay, explain why.
Well, due to the fact that, okay, some people think that just because something's legal, that if I got a job, I could go in there on what I just voted that became legal. And then the man comes around, gives me a cup, and I got to give him a sample. And, I mean, it's got marijuana in it. And if I'm working in a non-union facility or company, they can fire me right there. They can cut me loose. All right? And so, and to me, it was just another, how can I say it, another thing for people to go out here and get addicted on. And I know I've heard people say that, you know,
Hold on, real quick, Tom. Hold on, real quick, Tom. I'm getting noise from the peanut gallery over here. Gotta keep it down. Tom is talking. He's talking. People going crazy. They disagreeing with you, Tom. You got my people angry right now, man. Go ahead.
Well, you know what? Jesus made people angry too.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Keep going, Tom. Keep going.
But nevertheless, you know, I know they say that marijuana is non-addictive. Okay, fine and dandy, but I think some people go to this point, well, I've reached my level in terms of nirvana. I want to see if I can get to a higher level of nirvana.
Okay.
You know, and that kind of thing. But I mean, it's a reality. Okay?
Yeah.
And thank God for James Tate and his staff who came up with the variance ordinance that said that they couldn't be located within so many feet of schools, churches, parks, other places that sell liquor and that kind of thing. Because could you imagine, had they not voted on and approved that ordinance, what this place would be looking like right now? You'd have more marijuana dispensaries in this city just about than you got churches. No. And I mean, you got churches almost, I heard this a few years ago.
Yeah, go ahead.
11,000 blocks and 5,000 churches in this city.
Yeah.
I said that's a church for every other block.
Yeah, no, we don't have that many marijuana dispensaries. I mean, I think the most we had was like 200,
Yeah, it had gotta be
88.
that, yeah.
I mean, it was a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, but
Right, right. I mean, when you consider what 200 within a 40 square mile radius, I mean, that's close to almost wanting to have one every other block, but not quite. But it's less than one per mile almost. You know what I'm saying? 1 plus.
yeah, man. I mean, listen, I understand. I mean, look, I think that where you gonna place them now, I think there's a law. I think that said they had to be 1,000 feet
Right.
or something from there. I don't know if that's local ordinance or
No,
that's
I
like
think it was
federal
local
law or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But I think like the federal, but no, there's like a federal law that says something like that too. I think this is farther than what the federal law was. I think the federal one was like 500,
Right.
and then I think like this one was like 1,000.
Right.
But they
1,000
got
feet,
taken to court though about it,
Right.
I think, and then it failed. Right?
Yeah. and
Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think you are. And I think they
Yeah.
cut it down to 500 feet.
Yeah, I think it's back to like
Yeah.
5. I'm not knocking James Tate. I mean, what he's doing. I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all. I'm just trying to make sure I get the facts of like
I
what
understand.
happened. Right. But I understand what you're saying. Listen, and let me say this. That's a good point. Because, you know, if you got kids, you don't want them in schools, people who should advertise them in schools, they should be arrested. That's wrong. You know, or now, I mean, churches, I'm a little bit different. I mean, I understand in one hand, you don't want that in your place of worship. At the other hand, I mean, I'm not, this is probably why I'm not a pastor. But if I was one, I'm thinking, you want people who do that are there because you want to save those souls, and they that close to your proximity. You know, you got a whole bunch of people you can minister to or evangelize to every week. But I'm a little bit different, so I mean, I guess people don't agree. But if you don't want that around your church, that's fine too. You shouldn't have to have it around in your church, or you can't smoke it publicly anyway, according to the legal things. So it don't make no sense, going to a park or anything like that in the first place. You know what I mean? Because you can't smoke it publicly anyway.
Well, you're not supposed.
Yeah, you're not. You're right. You're right. Thank you for the correction. You're not supposed to. The difference between
Right.
you people doing what they're supposed to or not. That's right. You're very right about that.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying, and that makes sense. I think it's how it's going to be worked out and where they're going to be. But like I said, like 23, I think like 23 miles of land is like vacant in the city.
Yeah.
There's places where they can find it. There's certain places they can find, in certain areas where they can legalize this. There's certain places I'm sure downtown you can find where you can put some of these shops at. I mean, they got strip clubs downtown for
Well,
crying out loud. You know what I'm saying?
I said that.
So I mean, I think the city's still trying to work out where it is and how it is. But if you go to some of these other places, you go like to Denver, you know what I'm saying? They got like 200 something pot shops over there. You go to LA, you know what I mean? They got like 300, 400. They got as many pot shops as they got Starbucks over there in Los Angeles. So, I mean, there's other cities who understand the benefit of this and how they're going to use it and what they're going to do to help people. You got tax money. I also think it's just the fact that the amount of savings that we're receiving in the state, federal, and county levels in terms of people getting locked up and the hyper incarceration, the mass incarceration that these laws have created. The amount of look, in 2012, there were more black folks under lock and key than there were black folks under lock and key during apartheid in South Africa, man. That is a problem. More black people in prison now than there were slaves during the Civil War. So, I mean, I think that from that perspective, I can understand why this is. But like you said again, it's just a state level. We got the federal level to go. This is usually how this process works, though, is that states are laboratories of democracy, and they do these things in the states, and then the federal government catches on, and then eventually it'll be legalized and we can go from there. But I agree with what you're saying. I'm going to give you the last word, then we're going to take another caller.
Okay, you know what you're saying, you make lemonade out of lemons. I think that the city should get a bigger cut in terms of the money.
I agree.
And also, I mean, as much money as this will probably raise, this will be a good thing to start to fix the damn roads.
Yeah.
And on that, I'm gone.
Thank you, brother. I
right.
appreciate you. Totally agree with you.
All right.
30% of this is going to the road. So I totally agree. And let me say this too. I should have said this earlier. I was part of the campaign to legalize marijuana. I was actually part of the campaign going out, talking to people about why we should legalize it. I want to make that clear. So I'm not I'm not an objective party in this. Full disclosure. We got another call. You got another caller. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon. What's going on?
Nothing. Same as usual. I want to say about this marijuana addiction.
Yeah.
Now, everybody, my relatives that I know that smoke marijuana, the ones who have died from whatever causes, that marijuana is addictive. Now, it's the chemicals. Now, if you burn your own and don't put no chemicals in, yes, it's not addictive. But once those chemicals get in, that's when it becomes addictive. The same thing with cigarette smoking. When they put the nicotine in cigarettes, I was addicted to nicotine for 38 years.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes addictive.
Yeah.
And I want to put that out there, these people, and plus, these young people that think that when they smoke this marijuana, they don't legalize, it's not going to be strong enough for them to get a good high. They'll have to add stuff to it. So I voted no against marijuana myself. And plus that secondhand smoke. But I've been addicted before to cigarette nicotine. So I say all this stuff that got chemicals is addictive.
Well,
let me stop saying something's not addictive.
Well, let me say that. Well, listen. Let me say this first and foremost. I appreciate your call. I'm not saying that marijuana is not addictive. I'm saying that the research has shown that marijuana is less addictive than what currently is out there now. Its dependency rate, I think, according to the CDC, is about 9% compared to tobacco, which is about like 32%. Now. Usually the reason why marijuana has become stronger is because they found better ways to grow it. They got more advanced hydroponics. They got better seeds and land races from Colombia and other such places. They got more hybrids in terms of crossbreeding of different plants and things of that nature. So they perfected the process. I do think you're right, though, about the issue of chemicals, particularly with pesticides that they're putting in these plants. These are things that we're going to have to deal with and understand that. So I'm not saying it's not addictive. I'm saying it's just less addictive than what currently is out there. And it has medical benefits that the cigarettes and the alcohol don't have, and you can't die from it. And people are dying from opioids and prescription drugs for every day. And let's be honest too, we live in a country where we're prescribing things like Valium and Oxycontin and Percocet, you know what I mean, and Vicodin to our kids all the time. And 1 out of 100 children are dying from opioids every day. So I understand what you're saying. I just don't think that marijuana is as addictive as everything else. That's my time. Listen, love you. God bless you. We'll see you next time right here. Remember, nobody cares how much you know, so they know how much you care. I'm your state senator, Coleman. I thought we got to go. Hello? Calling you on the air. What's going on? Make it quick. I got to go. You got 30 seconds. You hung up? All right. Love you. We'll see you later. God bless you right here on The Young Effect.